Maya Chen sat in the back corner of advanced xenobiology, her fingers dancing across the holographic display with practiced ease. Around her, students from 12 different species struggled with the complex molecular structures floating before them. The Altarian beside her, whose crystalline features reflected the blue glow of the classroom projectors, had given up entirely on the assignment. 3 seats ahead, Avraxian's tentacles writhed in frustration as he attempted to manipulate the three-dimensional models. Maya finished her work in half the time it took most others to even understand the basic parameters. She always did. But she never raised her hand first, never volunteered answers, and certainly never drew attention to herself. When Professor Kellis asked for volunteers to present their molecular analysis, Maya's eyes stayed fixed on her tablet, while a brave Zephyrian student stumbled through an explanation that was mostly wrong. "Adequate," Professor Kellis rumbled, his massive frame casting shadows across the front of the classroom. The professor belonged to the Hegemony's warrior caste, a species that had conquered half the known galaxy before joining the Galactic Educational Collective. His 4 arms gestured dismissively at the holographic display. "Though I suspect some of you could do better. Miss Chen, perhaps you'd like to share your thoughts?" Every head turned toward Maya. She felt the familiar flutter of panic in her chest, the same feeling she got whenever anyone looked too closely, paid too much attention. Her dark hair fell across her face as she shook her head slightly. "I'm still working on it, Professor," she said quietly. The lie came easily after 3 years of practice. Professor Kellis studied her for a moment longer than comfortable, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence. "Very well. Class dismissed. Remember, your final projects on interspecies biological compatibility are due next cycle." As students began filing out, chattering in a dozen different languages and communication methods, Maya packed her belongings with deliberate slowness. She waited until the classroom was nearly empty before standing, slinging her bag over her shoulder with movements that seemed almost too fluid, too controlled for a normal 19-year-old human. The corridors of Nexus Academy buzzed with activity. Founded on the neutral station of Kepler 4042b, the Academy served as the premier educational institution for the galaxy's brightest young minds. Students from every member species of the Galactic Collective walked these halls, preparing to become the next generation of diplomats, scientists, and leaders. Maya had been attending for 3 years, and in all that time, she had made exactly 2 friends and attracted 0 attention from faculty or administration. That was exactly how she liked it. "Maya, wait up!" The voice belonged to Zara Okafor, one of the 2 friends Maya had somehow acquired despite her best efforts to remain invisible. The young woman jogged to catch up, her engineering uniform slightly wrinkled from a long lab session. "Did you see the news feeds today? There's something happening in the Outer Rim territories. Military buildup near the contested zone." Maya's step faltered for just a moment, so briefly that anyone watching might have thought they imagined it. "I don't really follow politics," she said, which wasn't entirely true. She followed politics very carefully, along with military movements, trade disputes, and anything else that might signal the galaxy was moving toward conflict again. "How can you not follow politics when your own species is involved?" Zara asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. "The Human Colonial Defense Force has been reinforcing their positions for weeks now. My brother's in the Terran Navy, and he says they're expecting trouble." They walked past a group of Hegemony students engaged in what appeared to be ritual combat practice. Their movements were precise, deadly. But somehow Maya's trained eye could spot 17 different openings in their defensive stances. She forced herself to look away. "Humans always expect trouble," Maya replied carefully. "We're good at preparing for problems that might never come." This wasn't entirely inaccurate. Since joining the Galactic Collective 50 years ago, humanity had gained a reputation for military paranoia and defensive preparedness that bordered on obsessive. Most species found it amusing. This tendency for humans to fortify their positions and train for conflicts that diplomatic channels usually resolved peacefully. They reached the dormitory complex, a massive structure that housed students from across the galaxy in species-appropriate environments. Maya's room was in the human sector, a relatively small area that accommodated the few dozen human students at the academy. "Want to grab dinner in the Commons?" Zara asked. Jek promised he'd try to explain quantum tunneling theory to us mere mortals. Jek was Maya's other friend, a brilliant Altarian studying advanced physics who had somehow decided that Maya and Zara were worth his time, despite their comparatively mundane academic focuses. Maya liked him because he rarely asked personal questions and seemed content to fill any conversational silence with complex mathematical theories. "Maybe later," Maya said. "I have some reading to catch up on." Zara's expression showed she didn't quite believe this excuse, but she nodded anyway. "All right, but you can't hide in your room forever. Some of us actually enjoy your company, you know." After Zara left, Maya stood in front of her door for a long moment before placing her palm on the scanner. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a space that was Spartanly functional compared to most student quarters. No decorations adorned the walls, no personal mementos cluttered the surfaces. Everything Maya owned could fit into a single travel bag, and usually did. She moved to her desk and activated her personal terminal, her fingers flying across the interface with the same fluid precision she brought to everything else. Within moments, she had accessed 17 different news feeds, military communication channels, and intelligence reports that most civilians would never see. Her credentials were legitimate, technically speaking, though they represented access levels that a 19-year-old xenobiology student had no business possessing. The reports painted a picture that concerned her. Tensions were indeed rising along the outer rim, where human colonial territories bordered space claimed by the hegemony. Both sides were moving ships into position, ostensibly for routine military exercises, but Maya recognized the patterns. She had seen them before, in briefing rooms and strategy sessions that felt like a lifetime ago. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Maya's stomach dropped when she saw the sender identification. Commander Sarah Walsh, Terran Colonial Intelligence, her former handler. The message was brief, encoded in a cipher that Maya had hoped never to see again. "Package 77 requires immediate activation. Rendezvous at coordinates following. Time sensitive. No acknowledgement required." Maya stared at the screen for exactly 30 seconds before deleting the message and shutting down her terminal. She sat back in her chair and closed her eyes, trying to push away memories that threatened to surface. She had been Maya Chen, ordinary student, for 3 years now. She had built a life, made friends, attended classes, and written papers on alien biology. She had almost convinced herself that the other life, the one before, had been someone else entirely. But Package 77 had been her operational designation with Colonial Intelligence. And if they were activating her now, after 3 years of radio silence, it meant the situation in the Outer Rim was worse than the public reports suggested. Maya opened her eyes and began to plan. First, she would need to access her emergency supplies, hidden in a storage compartment that her dormitory scanners couldn't detect. Then she would need to create a plausible excuse for a temporary absence from classes. Finally, she would need to remember how to be someone other than the quiet girl who sat in the back of xenobiology class. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had spent 3 years learning about alien species, studying their biological systems and social structures in an academic setting, but her real education in xenobiology had come much earlier, in training facilities and combat zones, where understanding an enemy's physiology could mean the difference between mission success and a very unpleasant death. Maya Chen, student, began to fade as something else took her place. something that had been sleeping for 3 years, waiting for the day when the galaxy would need her particular skills once again. Outside her window, Nexus Academy continued its peaceful academic routine. Students studied, professors lectured, and the great experiment in interspecies education proceeded exactly as it had for decades. None of them knew that sitting in dormitory room 4A127, a weapon was remembering how to be dangerous. Maya stood and moved to her closet, pressing her hand against what appeared to be a solid back wall. A hidden panel slid aside, revealing equipment that would have raised serious questions from Academy security. The combat suit was exactly as she had left it, along with weapons that no civilian student should possess and identity documents that would pass any inspection in the galaxy. She had hoped never to touch these things again. The girl who had worn this equipment, who had used these weapons, who had carried these identities, was supposed to be dead and buried under 3 years of normal life. But as Maya lifted the sleek black fabric of the combat suit, she felt muscle memory awakening in her hands. Her body remembered the weight of the armor plating, the placement of weapon holsters, the feel of equipment that had kept her alive through operations across hostile space. The message had been clear: immediate activation, which meant she had perhaps 12 hours before someone came looking for her if she didn't report to the rendezvous. And if colonial intelligence came looking for her at Nexus Academy, her carefully constructed cover would evaporate like morning frost. Maya began to change clothes with the methodical precision of someone who had done this many times before. The student uniform came off, folded neatly and placed aside. The combat suit went on like a second skin, its adaptive fibers adjusting to her movements and body temperature. Weapon harnesses settled into familiar positions across her torso and thighs. When she was finished, the person standing in the dormitory room looked nothing like the quiet girl who attended xenobiology lectures. This person moved with predatory grace, checked weapon charges with practiced efficiency, and reviewed mission protocols with the cold focus of a professional killer. Maya sealed the hidden compartment and activated a program on her personal terminal that would generate automated responses to messages and maintain the illusion of normal student activity for the next several days. She had built multiple contingency plans during her first year at the academy, hoping never to use them. The corridors of the dormitory were empty as she made her way toward the service exits. Her footsteps made no sound against the metal flooring, and she avoided the main security checkpoints with the kind of route knowledge that came from extensive reconnaissance. Within 20 minutes of receiving the activation message, Maya Chen had effectively ceased to exist. The transport bay held dozens of civilian shuttles and cargo haulers. Maya approached a nondescript freighter registered to a shipping company that existed only in computer records. Her access codes still worked, which meant colonial intelligence had been maintaining her assets even during her 3 years of inactive status. As the shuttle's engines hummed to life, Maya allowed herself one last look at Nexus Academy through the viewport. Somewhere in that vast educational complex, Zara was probably wondering why she hadn't shown up for dinner. Jack was likely working through quantum equations in the physics lab, occasionally looking around for friends who weren't there. Maya had spent 3 years building something resembling a normal life, complete with normal friendships and normal problems. In a few hours, that life would become just another cover identity, another role played for the sake of operational necessity. The shuttle cleared the station's gravitational field and jumped to hyperspace, carrying its passenger toward a rendezvous that would determine whether Maya Chen, student, would ever exist again. Behind her, Nexus Academy continued its peaceful rotation, unaware that one of its most unremarkable students had just disappeared into the darkness between the stars. The rendezvous point was a desolate asteroid mining station in unclaimed space, the kind of place where ships could meet without attracting attention from any government censors. Maya's shuttle docked at Bay 7, exactly as specified in the coded message. The station's artificial gravity felt lighter than Nexus Academy's carefully calibrated Earth-normal environment, and she moved with the subtle adjustments of someone who had operated in dozens of different gravitational fields. Commander Sarah Walsh was waiting in the docking bay, looking exactly as Maya remembered her, tall, sharp-featured, with the kind of professional composure that came from 20 years in colonial intelligence. She wore civilian clothes, but her posture and the slight bulge under her jacket suggested she was armed and ready for trouble. "Agent Chen," Walsh said, using the name Maya hadn't heard in 3 years. "Thank you for responding so quickly." "I'm not Agent Chen anymore," Maya replied, though she made no move to leave. "I'm a student studying xenobiology. I have exams next week." Walsh's smile was thin and completely without humor. "I'm afraid your academic career is about to be interrupted. We have a situation that requires your particular expertise." They walked through corridors that smelled of recycled air and industrial lubricants. The asteroid station was a commercial operation, officially neutral territory where businesses could operate without interference from any galactic government. Unofficially, it was a favorite meeting place for intelligence operatives, smugglers, and anyone else who needed to conduct business away from prying eyes. The briefing room was small and sterile, containing nothing but a table, 2 chairs, and a holographic projector. Walsh activated the projector, filling the air with star charts and tactical displays that Maya recognized as real-time intelligence data. 3 days ago, a human Colonial Defense Force patrol squadron encountered a hegemony battle group in the Kepler 186 system, Walsh began. What should have been a routine border patrol turned into a firefight that left 2 human ships destroyed and 1 hegemony cruiser heavily damaged. Maya studied the tactical readouts with the trained eye of someone who had analyzed thousands of similar reports. "The engagement pattern doesn't make sense," she said after a moment. "Neither side had strategic advantage in that system. Why would the hegemony initiate combat?" "That's exactly what we need to find out. The hegemony claims our ships fired first, unprovoked. Our sensor logs show their battle group was already in attack formation when our patrol arrived. Someone is lying, and if we can't prove what really happened, this incident could escalate into open war." The holographic display shifted, showing detailed schematics of hegemony military installations. Maya recognized several of them from previous operations, classified missions that officially never happened. Her stomach tightened as she began to understand why they had activated her. "The Hegemony War Council is meeting tomorrow on Fortress Station Theta 7, Walsh continued. "They're going to vote on whether to declare the Kepler incident an act of war. If that vote passes, the Hegemony fleet will begin moving toward human space within hours. And you want me to infiltrate a Hegemony fortress station, access their military communications, and find proof that they started the fight," Maya said flatly. "That's assuming I can even get inside without being detected." "Actually, we have a way to get you inside. The Hegemony has been recruiting mercenaries for security operations in the Outer Rim. Your cover identity as a freelance operative is still active in their databases. You can walk right through their front door." Maya laughed, a sound without any trace of humor. "Sarah, I was a deep cover operative for 4 years before I retired. I know exactly how these operations go wrong. The Hegemony's security protocols have advanced significantly since my last mission. Their bioscanners can detect human physiology even through advanced disguises. Which is why we're not using a disguise this time." Walsh activated another display, showing genetic modification procedures that made Maya's blood run cold. "Our science division has developed a temporary biological camouflage system, viral modification that alters your cellular structure for approximately 72 hours. You would appear completely hegemony to any scanner." "The side effects?" "Temporary paralysis, cellular degradation, possible permanent organ damage, and a 15% chance of complete system failure resulting in death." Walsh delivered this information with the same tone she might use to discuss weather patterns. "But it would get you inside." Maya stared at the genetic modification data, her mind automatically calculating risks and probabilities. The procedure was insane, medically dangerous, and completely against colonial intelligence protocols for agent safety. It was also probably the only way to complete the mission successfully. "There's something else," she said after a long silence. "Something you're not telling me." Walsh's expression didn't change, but Maya caught the slight tension around her eyes. After years of working together, Maya could read her former handler's tells like a technical manual. "The hegemony has acquired intelligence about human military capabilities that they shouldn't possess," Walsh admitted. "Classified information about our defensive systems, ship specifications, and tactical doctrines. Someone is feeding them our secrets." "You think there's a mole?" "We know there's a mole. What we don't know is who or how high up the leak goes. The information they have could only come from someone with very high security clearance." Maya felt pieces clicking into place in her mind. "And you think the mole might be involved with the Kepler incident, that this wasn't just a border skirmish that got out of hand. We think someone arranged for our patrol to be in that system at exactly the right time to encounter a hegemony battle group that was already prepared for combat. Someone wanted this incident to happen." The implications were staggering. If someone in colonial intelligence or the defense force was deliberately trying to start a war with the hegemony, the consequences would be catastrophic. Humanity was still a relatively young member of the galactic collective, lacking the military resources and alliance networks that older species possessed. A war with the hegemony would likely end with human space under occupation and Earth itself under siege. "What's the mission timeline?" Maya asked, though part of her already knew she was going to accept, not because she wanted to return to the life she had left behind, but because billions of human lives hung in the balance. "Insertion tomorrow morning. The genetic modification procedure takes 6 hours, followed by 12 hours of recovery. That puts you on Fortress Station Theta 7 approximately 2 hours before the War Council meeting begins." Maya studied the station schematics, her trained mind already mapping infiltration routes and escape plans. Theta 7 was one of the hegemony's most secure installations, a massive military fortress that housed their primary fleet command center. Getting inside would be nearly impossible. Getting out alive would be a miracle. "I'll need equipment modifications for hegemony physiology," she said, accepting the mission without explicitly stating it. "Their weapon systems use different neural interfaces, and their computer systems require direct biological connection." "Already prepared. Everything you need is in Storage Bay 12. Your extraction point will be a salvage operation in the outer asteroid belt. Window opens 76 hours after insertion." "And if I miss the extraction window?" Walsh was quiet for a moment. "Then you'll be dead, and we'll try to prevent the war through diplomatic channels that probably won't work." Maya nodded, filing away the information with the same professional detachment that had kept her alive through dozens of operations. Fear was a luxury that operatives couldn't afford, and doubt was a weakness that enemies exploited. "One more thing," Walsh said as Maya stood to leave. "Your academic records at Nexus Academy will show that you've taken a leave of absence for a family emergency on Earth. When you return, assuming you return, everything will be exactly as you left it. Except I'll have the memories of infiltrating a fortress station and stealing military secrets that could prevent a galactic war. Consider it continuing education in xenobiology, very hands-on field research." Maya almost smiled at that, remembering her quiet life attending lectures and studying molecular structures. 3 days ago, her biggest concern had been finishing a research paper on interspecies biological compatibility. Now she was preparing for a mission that would require her to become biologically compatible with an entirely different species. The equipment in Storage Bay 12 was extensive and sophisticated, representing years of development by Colonial Intelligence's technical division. The biological modification kit looked like medical equipment designed by engineers who had never considered patient comfort. Various weapons had been modified to interface with hegemony neural patterns. Communication gear was disguised as standard hegemony military hardware. Maya spent 6 hours reviewing every piece of equipment, testing connections, and memorizing operating procedures. Her hegemony language skills were fluent, though she would need to adjust her vocal patterns to match their physiological differences. Her knowledge of hegemony culture and military protocols was extensive, updated regularly through intelligence briefings even during her academic retirement. The genetic modification procedure began at Oro 400 station time in a medical facility that technically didn't exist in any official records. Maya lay on a biomodification table while automated systems introduced viral agents into her bloodstream. The pain was immediate and intense as her cellular structure began to shift and adapt. For 6 hours, Maya's body transformed itself into something that wasn't quite human and wasn't quite hegemony. Her bone density increased to match their heavier skeletal structure. Her cardiovascular system adapted to process different atmospheric compositions. Her neural pathways rewired themselves to interface with alien technology. When the procedure was complete, Maya looked in the mirror and saw a stranger wearing her face. Her skin had taken on the slightly metallic sheen that characterized hegemony physiology. Her eyes had changed color to the deep amber that indicated mature warrior caste status. Her muscle mass had increased to match their physical capabilities. But underneath the biological camouflage, Maya Chen remained herself. Her memories were intact, her training was sharp, and her determination was absolute. In 18 hours, she would walk into one of the most secure military installations in the galaxy, steal classified information that could prevent a war, and somehow find a way to escape with her life. The student who had attended xenobiology lectures for 3 years was gone, replaced by something that could pass for hegemony in any scanner and fight like a human when cornered. Maya checked her equipment one final time, reviewed her cover identity, and prepared to become someone else entirely. Fortress Station. Theta 7 was waiting, along with answers that could determine the fate of humanity's place in the galaxy. Maya had spent 3 years learning about alien species in the safety of an academic environment. Now she would test that knowledge in the deadliest classroom imaginable. Fortress Station. Theta 7 hung in the void like a metallic predator, its angular surfaces bristling with weapon emplacements and sensor arrays. Maya approached in a modified transport that broadcast hegemony mercenary identification codes, her heart rate steady despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. The genetic modification had held perfectly during the journey, her transformed physiology registering as authentic hegemony warrior caste on every scanner. The docking procedure was routine, almost disappointingly so. Maya's cover identity as Keth Var, a freelance security operative with an exemplary service record, passed through multiple authentication checks without triggering any alerts. She disembarked with the confident stride that hegemony culture demanded, her modified neural patterns automatically adjusting her body language to match their social expectations. The station's corridors were filled with military personnel preparing for the War Council session. Maya recognized the tension in their movements, the way conversations stopped when officers passed, the subtle signs that indicated an organization preparing for conflict. Her enhanced hearing caught fragments of discussion about fleet movements, supply lines, and tactical assessments that painted a picture of an empire mobilizing for war. Maya's assigned quarters were in the mercenary section, an area reserved for hired operatives who weren't granted full access to station facilities. This limitation actually worked in her favor, as it provided a plausible reason to move through different sections while appearing to search for amenities or reporting stations. She spent the first 4 hours conducting careful reconnaissance, mapping security protocols, and identifying the targets specified in her mission briefing. The War Council chambers were located in the station's most secure section, protected by multiple layers of biometric scanning and armed guards. The Military Communications Center was equally well defended, its access restricted to senior officers and authorized technical personnel. But Maya had learned during her years of active duty that the most valuable intelligence often came from sources that seemed mundane. Administrative terminals, personnel records, and routine communications frequently contained information that formal intelligence gathering missed entirely. Her opportunity came during the shift change preceding the War Council session. Maya intercepted a junior technician heading toward the communications center, a young hegemony male whose nervous demeanor suggested he was new to his position. Her approach was casual, seemingly accidental. "Technician," she said, using the formal address pattern that hegemony military protocol required. "I require access to communication logs for security verification purposes." The technician's amber eyes widened slightly as he took in Maya's warrior caste markings and the equipment that identified her as hired security. Yes, of course, though I should inform you that Senior Technician Graxmore has restricted access to all communication logs pending the council session." Maya filed away the name while maintaining her authoritative bearing. "The restriction applies to standard personnel. I am conducting security sweeps under direct authorization from the Council Guard." This was a complete fabrication, but delivered with enough confidence that the junior technician didn't question it. Maya followed him through corridors that became progressively more secure, her modified biological signatures passing every scanner without triggering alerts. The communications center was a vast chamber filled with holographic displays and quantum transmission equipment capable of instantaneous contact with any point in hegemony space. Maya's trained eye immediately identified the systems she needed to access, but she also noticed something unexpected. Human communication protocols were integrated into their network architecture. While the technician busied himself with routine maintenance tasks, Maya activated her concealed recording equipment and began systematically accessing communication logs from the past week. The data streams were enormous, containing everything from routine supply requisitions to strategic military orders. She found the first anomaly in a transmission log dated 3 days before the Kepler incident. A priority message from an encrypted source identifying itself only as Deep Current. The message contained detailed information about human Colonial Defense Force patrol schedules in the Kepler system, including ship specifications, crew rotations, and tactical protocols. Maya's enhanced cognitive processing allowed her to analyze the data patterns in real time. The information had been transmitted using colonial intelligence encryption methods, but routed through hegemony communication networks. Someone with access to highly classified human military data was feeding information directly to Hegemony Fleet Command. The second anomaly was even more disturbing. Tactical assessments of human defensive capabilities that were so detailed they could only have come from someone present during classified strategic planning sessions. Ship vulnerabilities, command structure analysis, and psychological profiles of senior Colonial Defense Force officers were all included in reports marked for distribution to Hegemony War Council members. Maya continued her search, finding evidence of a systematic intelligence operation that had been running for at least 18 months. The scope of the information leak was staggering, encompassing everything from military technology specifications to diplomatic negotiation strategies. Someone had been methodically undermining human security from within their own government. But the most damaging discovery was hidden in a secure partition that required Maya to use advanced penetration techniques she had hoped never to employ again. Buried in the data core was a complete operational plan titled Catalyst Protocol, outlining a strategy to manipulate both human and hegemony forces into armed conflict. The plan was sophisticated and carefully crafted. Stage 1 involved feeding intelligence to hegemony forces about human military movements, creating opportunities for accidental encounters. Stage 2 required ensuring that when these encounters occurred, both sides would be prepared for combat rather than peaceful contact. Stage 3 involved escalating minor incidents into major diplomatic crises that would justify military action. The Kepler incident had been Stage 2 of Catalyst Protocol, executed exactly as planned. Human patrol ships had been directed into a system where hegemony battle groups were already positioned and briefed to expect hostile contact. The subsequent firefight had been inevitable, designed to create the exact crisis that now threatened to escalate into galactic war. Maya downloaded the complete Catalyst Protocol files while her enhanced hearing monitored the communication center's activity levels. The War Council session would begin in 30 minutes, and she needed to be gone before security protocols tightened further. But as she prepared to leave, Maya discovered something that made her blood freeze. The identity of Deep Current was embedded in the operational files, hidden behind multiple layers of encryption that had taken her modified processing power nearly an hour to crack. Deep Current was Commander Sarah Walsh. Maya stared at the data for exactly 10 seconds before her training took over. Her extraction timeline had just become critically urgent. If Walsh was the mole, then Maya's mission had been compromised from the moment she received the activation message. The rendezvous point, the equipment cache, even the genetic modification procedure could all be part of an elaborate trap. She completed her data download and began moving toward the extraction route she had planned, but now every security checkpoint felt like a potential ambush. Maya's modified physiology was still registering as authentic hegemony on all scanners, but if Walsh had warned them to expect an infiltrator, biological camouflage would be meaningless. The station's corridors were becoming crowded as personnel moved toward their assigned positions for the War Council session. Maya used the activity as cover, blending into groups of military personnel while making her way toward the outer docking levels. Her enhanced senses detected no immediate pursuit, but that could change quickly if her cover was blown. Maya reached her hidden equipment cache and began changing into the civilian clothes that would allow her to blend in with departing merchant traffic. As she worked, she reviewed the evidence she had gathered, analyzing its implications for human security and her own survival chances. The Catalyst Protocol represented a level of betrayal that went beyond simple espionage. Someone had been systematically working to start a war that would likely result in humanity's destruction or subjugation. The question was whether Walsh was working alone or as part of a larger conspiracy within colonial intelligence. Maya's extraction route took her through maintenance corridors toward a section of the station where civilian contractors were preparing to depart before the War Council session concluded. Her timing had to be perfect. Too early, and she would attract attention. Too late, and the station's lockdown protocols would prevent any departures. She was 20 meters from the civilian transport bay when her enhanced hearing detected the distinctive sound of military boots moving in tactical formation. Security teams were conducting searches of the outer station levels, checking identification and questioning anyone who couldn't provide proper authorization. Maya altered her route, using service corridors that most station personnel didn't know existed. Her 3 years of studying alien architecture at Nexus Academy had included extensive analysis of hegemony construction methods, knowledge that was now proving invaluable for navigation. The civilian transport she had selected was a cargo hauler scheduled to depart for a commercial station in neutral space. Maya approached the loading bay with the casual confidence of someone who belonged there, her forged documentation identifying her as a parts supplier completing a delivery contract. But as she presented her credentials to the transport captain, Maya's enhanced senses detected something that made her heart race, the distinctive electronic signature of colonial intelligence tracking equipment hidden somewhere in the cargo bay. Walsh hadn't just compromised the mission, She had set up Maya for capture or elimination. The evidence Maya had gathered about Catalyst Protocol was too dangerous to be allowed to reach human government officials. Someone wanted both Maya and the proof of the conspiracy to disappear permanently. Maya had perhaps 60 seconds before the tracking equipment pinpointed her location, and security teams converged on the transport bay. She needed to find another way off the station, and she needed to ensure that the intelligence she had gathered would survive even if she didn't. Her modified equipment included an emergency communication system capable of quantum transmission directly to Colonial Intelligence headquarters. Maya activated the system and began transmitting the complete Catalyst Protocol files, along with her analysis and the evidence of Walsh's involvement. The transmission would take 90 seconds to complete. Maya had perhaps half that time before security forces surrounded her position. She moved deeper into the transport bay, using cargo containers as cover, while her equipment finished uploading the critical intelligence. Maya's enhanced physiology was beginning to show signs of breakdown as the genetic modification reached its operational limits. Her vision was becoming slightly blurred, and her coordination was starting to deteriorate. Security teams entered the cargo bay with weapons drawn, their scanner equipment tracking the Colonial Intelligence signals to Maya's approximate location. She had 15 seconds to complete the transmission before her equipment would be detected and destroyed. Maya made a decision that went against every survival instinct she possessed. Instead of fleeing, she stood up and surrendered, buying the final seconds needed for her transmission to reach its destination. "I am Agent Maya Chen, Colonial Intelligence," she announced, knowing that her words were being recorded by security systems. "I am hereby surrendering myself for processing as a prisoner of war under galactic collective protocols." The security team leader approached cautiously, his weapon trained on Maya while scanners analyzed her biological signature. The readings were confusing the equipment, showing both human and hegemony characteristics in ways that their computers couldn't process. "Search her for equipment," the team leader ordered, "and contact medical for biological analysis. This one is using modification technology we haven't seen before." As hegemony security personnel secured Maya and confiscated her equipment, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The Catalyst Protocol evidence was now in the hands of Colonial Intelligence analysts who could act on it appropriately. Walsh's conspiracy would be exposed, and the war she had tried to engineer might still be prevented. Maya's last coherent thought before the genetic modification system finally collapsed was that her students at Nexus Academy would never know how much their quiet classmates' final exam had been worth. The xenobiology knowledge she had gained during 3 years of peaceful study had just been applied in the field in ways that no academic curriculum could have prepared her for. The girl who had sat in the back of advanced xenobiology class was gone, replaced by something that had infiltrated the enemy's most secure installation and emerged with intelligence that could save billions of lives. Maya Chen, student, had become Agent Chen one final time, and in doing so, had discovered that sometimes the most important lessons happened far from any classroom.